Hey everybody! We are reviewing the last of the Stephen King movies, and the title of it is Silver Bullet, and it came out in 1985 and is based on a corresponding novella called Cycle of the Werewolf, which is very hard to get, apparently. I'd never heard of it before, so I was anxious to watch it. In the spring of 1976, in the town of Tarker's Mill, a man working on the railroad tracks on a moonlit night sees huge animal footprints in the dirt. He's been drinking heavily and hearing noises. Maybe he's hallucinating. A shadowy figure creeps up, covering the prints, and when the guy looks up, all hell breaks loose, and the railroad worker's head is ripped off. This is the beginning of a string of killings to plague this little town. Corey Haim is Marty, who has paralyzed legs and moves around in a handmade motorized wheelchair built by his effusive drunken Uncle Red. And who plays Uncle Red? Gary Busey, of course. Who else could play a laid-back, over-the-top, but a little held back for his part in this movie of a drunken uncle? He loves his nephew Marty and his niece Jamie, who is Megan Follows from Anne of the Green Gables.
Megan Fox?
Megan Follows.
Oh.
From Anne of the Green Gables. Throughout the movie, a little of the character Anne emerges, but for this part, Megan is a big sister who gets tired of looking after her little brother and his tricks too. For example, one time he and his best friend played tricks on Jamie, like putting a live garter snake in front of her, scaring her into falling into a muddy puddle of water.
I like snakes a lot, so I would have taken that snake home if I were her.
Well, maybe the friend did. We didn't really see what happened to the snake. Uncle Red, Marty, and Jamie, and the sheriff, who is played by Terry O'Quinn from the Stepfather movie series, and Everett McGill, who plays Reverend Lowe, are the main characters in Silver Bullet.
And where is Everett McGill from? Twin Peaks.
Aha!
As well as the greatest horror movie of the 90s named The People Under the Stairs.
Now, initially, the title Silver Bullet, although I'd never heard of the movie or the book, it made me think of werewolves because I have seen the Universal Monster movie, The Wolfman, with Lon Chaney Jr. Being shot with a silver bullet is supposed to kill a werewolf. However, Marty's motorized wheelchair is also called the Silver Bullet.
And if you remember in the original Wolfman movie, they do not kill him with the silver bullet. His father beats him to death with his silver cane.
Well, I guess the basic little word is silver.
Silver.
So I was left wondering how this story would play out. Basically, this werewolf kills several people, and it's up to Marty, Jamie, and Uncle Red to solve the problem. Go ahead, Marco.
Well, I don't know. I heard mixed things about this movie. On one hand, I heard it was really good, but on the other hand, I heard it was too short and it was kind of simple and words like that don't really attract me. Simple, short, I don't like that. I like movies when they're longer and they're more thought out and detailed. Excuse the cat purring and licking sounds, by the way. And so I thought this movie was really good, in my opinion, like what the first group of people said. I haven't seen a lot of werewolf movies. I've seen The Wolfman, both the original and the remake.
The Goosebumps movie,
Well,
Curse of the
that's
Werewolf.
not a movie. That's a
show.
episodes.
Episode.
There's two great Goosebumps episodes. There's the Werewolf at Fever Swamp,
Right.
and then there is the Werewolf Skin.
Right.
And I love both of those.
The werewolf skin's really good.
But as well, I've seen the Werewolf in London. Those are pretty much the only werewolf things I've seen. Oh yeah, and Frankenstein meets the Wolfman. Other than that, I haven't seen anything related to those. So I really enjoyed this movie in terms of being a werewolf movie too. I loved the effects. I loved all the characters. I loved the story, kind of. I thought it had a good payoff, which is rare for Stephen King movies. And but there are a few problems I have with it, such as the narration. The sister, the older sister, Megan Fox Follows. She narrates the movie, but she only narrates it every 30 minutes.
Very sporadic.
So it's like, what's the point?
Yeah, they didn't need that.
Number two, the werewolf character, him or herself, I'm not going to spoil who it is, they are not really a character. They're kind of like a one-dimensional character, not really like in the Dead Zone where it's like a political thing, political agenda.
No, it's nothing to do with politics.
It's more about, it's more just he or she, they don't have much to them. They lack any character because they're barely in the movie. And I think it would have been better if they were featured in the movie a lot more. And I really, in my opinion, I think this movie is Gary Busey's movie. He's pretty much the shining star. If he wasn't in this movie would suck. And that's just the truth. In fact, there should have been more of him in this movie too. They should have just had like 2 hours of him. I don't care. It would have been cool. Like a TV movie of Silver Bullet with 3 hours, 4 or 5 hours, where me and Sophie get a headache trying to watch the whole thing in a couple of days. So what did you think about the movie, Sophie?
Okay, well, I thought it was a simple story. Maybe it was too simple, because one of the negatives I have, I'll bring up in a minute. I love the characters, but mainly I love the actors they picked to play the characters, at least the main ones. And maybe for the characters like the parents of the kids, the two kids, they picked, okay people because they were terrible parents in the movie.
And you want to talk about something that I didn't like? The parents. The parents were horrible. They were disgusting people. They're kind of like the parents you see nowadays on a regular basis, but worse.
My favorite scene is pretty. It's pretty. It's kind of like in the first quarter of the movie, maybe at the end of the quarter.
Better not be a spoiler.
It's not a spoiler. It's just
Okay.
the fact that, and it probably isn't right. I don't know, but it's the town's 4 people, or how many people have been killed? Let's see, 1, 2, 3.
The railroad
at least 3
guy.
people. Well, we don't. I'm not even gonna say who was killed, but at least 3 people have been killed. So the townspeople go bananas, and they all get their guns, and they're out in
Okay.
this forest looking for the whatever.
In the fog.
And the fog is rising up from the ground. I thought it was a really cool scene. And then, of course, they start dropping off into the fog. But I just thought that scene was really cool looking. And like I said, I love the people who they got to play the characters. I loved Gary Busey. I thought he was just perfect. He was a great uncle. He was supposed to be like the drunken uncle, but he was actually helpful with the kids. He made that. He was very
And
talented
what
to
was funny
make that wheelchair.
what was funny is that he actually respected and cared for the kids more than the parents in the movie,
Yeah.
which is interesting because usually you think he's the drunken perverted
And
uncle,
he wouldn't care.
but it's actually the exact opposite. He's basically their real parent.
Well, I was going to say, he was more like a caring parent than they were.
Yeah.
Okay, well, the big problem I had with the entire movie, which I've talked to
Don't-
Marco,
don't
and he
spoil-
doesn't agree with
Don't
me.
spoil who the werewolf is.
No, I'm not. Is the fact that you
Even-
have a little community like this.
Yeah.
It's a town, little town, and I've lived in a small town, and I don't even. It may have been as big as this one, and you usually, and of course I haven't seen a lot of werewolf movies. Like I said, I only saw the basic Universal monster one, which the werewolf in that movie was bitten by another werewolf. That's how he got to be one. He was bitten. So the person who ends up being this, it's never explained. I mean, a monster doesn't just pop up out of nowhere in a small town because everybody'd be dead. Because he would have been biting people all along, but all of a sudden it just pops up, and it's just that, to me, that's a plot hole because it just doesn't work that way. In a small town, I mean, it's nobody moving in.
He or she, by the way.
Right. Well, it's nobody moving in, a stranger. There's no indication of that. Now, that could be in the book. I don't know. But there's no indicate that the person moved in a month ago, or it doesn't seem like that to me. It seems like this person is a well-established community member, and it just doesn't work that way.
Just
and if it,
Safi is obsessed with tearing down projects that feature small towns because when it comes to because it's funny when it comes to things that matter like
that matters.
plot and character, she doesn't care. But when it has to do with the small town, she gets up in arms, and I don't know, she's on a tirade here. She's been ranting the entire morning, even before we started shooting, about the origin of this werewolf, and I really don't think where he came from matters. I just think there should have been more to him, such as when we talked about the Hitcher, and how, I mean, I think it's more of a problem in the Hitcher. And stop scratching your arm. Do you have any idea how irritating that is for people trying to listen to a movie review? I thought it was more of a problem in the Hitcher, because in the Hitcher they were like emphasizing it. Where does he come from? Who is he? His name isn't in any database. And they were talking all about him as a person. There were all these clues that he gave out. But in this movie, I really don't think it's much of a problem. I do think he should have had more to do, though. He had very little to do. If you want to watch a good movie where the villain has more to do, just watch Fright Night. What do you think, Safi? Don't you agree that, like, in The Hitcher it was more of a problem?
I don't know. All I know is that if you look at the name of the novella, now I have which is called Cycle of the Werewolf. I've already talked about this with Marco, and he disagrees with me. But cycle could be the operative word here, which means that maybe the person turns into a werewolf every 10 years or every 5 years. He's talking about cycle could probably refer to the moon cycle because, of course, when does a werewolf appear? When the moon is in its fullest, which that could be true too because they are. It is called moon cycles, which show different, what you can see anyway, sizes of the moon. It is called a cycle. So I don't know. Yeah, I want to read the book, and like I said, it's very hard to get a hold of.
You've said that with all these Stephen King movies, though.
Well, this is
that
a
you
problem.
Want to read the book.
I think this is a big problem. But anyway, it's still. I like the movie, and it's just this. It's a nice little story, but there's a few things that leave you wondering, and what makes it really good too are the actors, like Marco said. For example, he said that Gary Busey, being in the movie, added so much that if he wasn't in it,
it made the movie.
It wouldn't be any good.
Yeah. Just like in Psycho, if Anthony Perkins wasn't Norman Bates,
no,
that movie would suck.
Yeah, he really.
Janet Leigh has nothing compared to Anthony Perkins. I mean, you could get any blonde actors to play her character. You couldn't get anybody to play Norman Bates.
Not with that look he gives. Like at the end, they show his face, and he's making this really weird face, and
it's the same thing for this movie. There's just a certain thing with casting people, with having and some people think that's a weakness actually. Like with Split, my favorite movie of 2017, people said, "Oh, if James McAvoy wasn't in Split, then it would suck." And yeah, I agree, but he is in the movie, and that's the point. Is that the movie actually has this perfect character and this perfect casting, and you should celebrate that and not think about the negative, which is if he's in the movie. Gary Busey is fantastic in this movie. He's probably the best character of all the Stephen King movies we've watched, actually. Even better than Christopher Walken.
Well,
it's your line, Sophie.
I think he may have more of a part to play because, first of all, he's playing almost like a substitute father to the kids, and he helps them in their endeavor to defeat the werewolf. And you're focusing because the kids are kids and he's the adult. Which is really funny because Gary Busey. He's such a kid himself, but in this movie he does play the adult, and because he treats the kids like they know something, he doesn't just automatically think they're dumb or act like he thinks they're dumb, like his parents do, like their parents act toward them. And
the effects were really good in this movie too. The effects. This is why. Horror used to be really good. Stuff like this, the effects. The effects of the werewolf in this movie are fantastic. The effects of like the kills, like someone who gets brutally beaten over the head with a baseball bat. Those effects are amazing. And just think, if this movie was made nowadays, it would be a computer animated werewolf who looks horrible. It would be and they wouldn't even show any of the kills, by the way, because they don't want to. They would just cut away. It would be PG-13. Oh, this person's gonna get killed. Oh, cut away, or computer animated blood. Yes, they do that, by the way. They don't. They're so effing lazy. They don't even use real blood. They use computer generated blood. How sick is that? All you have to do to make blood is either cut yourself or or get some corn syrup and put red food color in it, and that's it. It's that simple. And in this movie, it really demonstrates some of those oldie kind of effects that you'd see in the good horror movie days. And especially the fog. The fog reminded me of the Universal monster movies
Yeah.
where it's just, I mean, it's like they step into the fog. They break inside the fog. It looks so cool
It does.
and oldie gothic. Anyway, what would you rate this movie, Sophie?
Well, I gave it a McDonald's cheeseburger Happy Meal.
That's insulting.
It's just enough food for me, but sometimes it's missing the pickles. Or it has too many little onions on the burger, which I don't like. And by the time I get home, it's cold. In other words, it's never perfect. And this movie is not perfect because of the plot hole, but I still like it, and I still will watch it again.
That is so insulting, Sophie.
I don't think so.
I can't believe you would rate Silver
It's one of the few
Bullet.
things that I eat, so,
Yeah, okay. But
so
you
that
have
has to say
to
something.
you have to explain. In Sophie's terms, McDonald's Happy Meal is a gift from God. Which
Well, I don't know about that, but it's one of the few things that I can stand to eat. Because I'm having a hard time with eating right now, finding things that I like to eat. So, and it's not, like I said, it's not perfect. One time there were no pickles on it at all. I like to have at least a couple. And
there used to be 3. They were made to put 3 on it, but now I looked on their menu. It says they only put 2 on it, and the pickles are effing tiny. So.
And I can't imagine that pickles would be a costly ingredient to add to a sandwich. And anyway, so I just wanted to say that, like the movie, it's never perfect because of this missing information, and this kind of really goes to the fact that Marco says the movie's a little bit oversimplified, meaning it's a little too short.
Yeah, I don't like that type of thing.
And that they could have, if they would have added more material to the werewolf person, that would have helped. But they didn't, and so it leaves you wondering. And so I'm still wondering, and I'm going to read the book at Barnes and Noble. It's going to come out in paperback, but you have to pre-order it. And then they do have a copy at the library, but
That's because they have to print it. It was the same thing. I have Tom Savini's makeup book, makeup effects book, and I had to pre-order it because they had to actually print the whole thing because they don't have many copies of it. So I was going a little back and forth on this, but I've settled. I will give it. So the star of this movie is Gary Busey, obviously. It's not Corey Haim. It's not Megan Fox Follows.
No, they're the kids.
It's not Everett McGill, because he's hardly in it. And then it's not Terry O'Quinn. It's Gary Busey. So Gary Busey is represented by 2 grilled hot dogs. Grilled hot dogs with any type of toppings that you like, because Gary Busey is so spontaneous and kind of crazy that really you could take anything you want from him. He's Gary Busey, and he's what makes the hot dogs really good with any toppings you want. Personally, I like to have one with just ketchup and mustard, more ketchup than mustard, and then I like to have the other with ketchup and mustard kind of equal with onions and relish maybe, or yeah. And that's what I like with hot dogs. And as a side, of course, you gotta have some corn and beans, and that represents the kids. Probably the corn is the sister, and then the beans are the kid, or there's Corey Haim, and then the werewolf is represented by a typical small soda, and I'll just say the soda is. This is tough. The soda is Dr. Pepper, because usually when you get a small soda, sometimes they skimp out on the soda. They give you this small little soda, and what's in there is really good, but there's a lot of ice to cover up for the missing soda,
Mm.
and you
And
drink
that
it.
melts into water.
Yeah, and you drink it in 2 seconds, and they're like, wait a second, where's the rest of my drink? Oh wait, it's a small, and that's the werewolf in this movie. And spoiler alert. So that's what I give it. I give it 2 hot dogs by Gary Busey. If you didn't have hot dogs, this meal wouldn't work. A soda and beans and corn, ew. Maybe if you're homeless, and then everything else. That's what I give this movie. It gave me a very sort of small time independent uh, independent movie, old 80s horror type of feel, and that's what I gave it. So for spoiler alert, you start, Sophie. What do you have to say?
Well, I'm trying to think. Remember the friend that who I talked about, who he and Marty played trick on the sister with the snake. He's the one. He gets killed, and
They kind of skip over it.
they don't. Now the father, they show his father. Of course, now he does a good job because I mean, he's his father. It goes on, and he yells out in church, and he yells at the sheriff, and
No, the yelling in church was in the nightmare sequence.
well, I thought he talked about his kid being ripped up into pieces, and
I don't think he said that in reality. I think he only said that in the and yeah, he only said that in the dream sequence.
but he did say it to the sheriff
Yeah,
after
he did.
saw the body.
Yeah, he said it to the sheriff at the scene, and then he said it at the bar.
I thought it was weird because what happened was uh, they were flying kites, Marty and this boy, and they showed Marty, and he actually got up into a tree, and here he is. He has paralyzed legs, but he manages it, and he releases the kite, falls to the ground, and then the other guy, he's flying his own kite, and it's way up in the sky, and Jamie comes to pick up her brother, and so, but the boy, he's so busy, his friend's so busy flying his kite, he doesn't want to leave. And so all the town, they're kind of like under an order to go in early at night, or just not to be out.
And they aren't, which is funny because it shows how little the parents care about them.
Yeah, that was weird. And so then Marty and his sister go home, and the boy's left all by himself because he wants to be there, not because they left him to his own devices because they wanted to. He wanted to be there. And so then you're thinking, is something going to happen to him? But he's just a kid, and it's daytime. That's another thing that was weird. And then
It was getting to be evening though.
you find out he gets killed. And that's when, I think that's when the kids and the uncle spring into action. At least the beginning of it, where they're really seriously think about they've got to do something. but they don't. Their reactions to his killing, it wasn't that dramatic.
The kids weren't dramatic.
No, and that kind of surprised me because I would think, well, it's such a horrible thing that I would think they would have been a little bit more affected by it.
My favorite scene of this movie was when the werewolf used the bat to beat up the sheriff and used the bat to beat up the vigilante, because I thought it was really cool how even though he's a werewolf, he's so vicious and violent that he has to use a something around him like a bat and then use his claws. Like he overkills.
Yeah.
And I thought that was really cool. And I also like the werewolf nightmare sequence, and that for spoiler alert, I really think either number one, that the parents should have been killed and then they go live with their uncle who actually cares about them, or I think that the werewolf should have had more scenes in the movie. Everett McGill, the Reverend, he's the werewolf. I think, in fact, the sister should have been friends with him, and they could have like little talks, like she would talk to him about how she hates her brother, and he would talk to her in a lot of subtext that would give the viewers a little more insight into him, because I thought he was very minimally used in this movie. The chase sequence was really cool. Everything in this movie was cool.
Well, he's talking about the chase sequence.
Yeah.
Well, the thing is, at the beginning, like I mentioned, the boy has a motorized wheelchair called the Silver Bullet, and his uncle built it for him. Well, during the movie, his uncle made an upgraded version of the Silver Bullet, which made it go faster. And the boy gets on it, and it has controls on it, and real easy to use. And he gets on the road, which surprised he had no helmet, no license, and he's on the road speeding along in this wheelchair.
Yeah, that was a very funny visual.
It's cool, and
because it could never happen in real life.
No, never.
You get arrested.
Of course, it's a small town, and you have to have enough cops to be able to catch them.
Yeah, it's more realistic since it's such a small town, but in any Chicago suburban neighborhood, the kid would get arrested, thrown in jail.
Well, somebody would have called. There's nobody around to call the cops, and they probably wouldn't have done it anyway. So, unless it's somebody who's not a disagreeable person, but.
So that's all I really have to say about the movie.
Me too. So we will be ranking all the Stephen King movies.
It was all your idea, Sophie.
No, it's not my idea. This ranking everything is a big millennial thing, I think.
No, it's not.
And I don't know. We'll see how it works for me. Mark was already ranked everything, so he's all done. I have to go.
I'm going back and forth.
I have to do it.
I'm going back and forth on Silver Bullet, though. It's better than Salem's Lot, I'll say that.
Well, to me, it's hard. I don't remember all these other movies that much that I've seen. If they don't stick out, they must not be that great, I would think. If a movie is really good, it's going to always stand out in your mind. Like Psycho, for instance. I think Psycho's a really good movie. And I like The Shining with Jack Nicholson. To me, that's always going to stand. It's almost like iconic.
Well, Psycho isn't a Stephen King movie.
No, I'm just talking about different movies that when they stick out, when you like them because they stick out in your mind, you always remember them, and you always remember something positive about them. Another thing I have a problem with for Stephen King movies is that some of them were miniseries, which means they were dragged out for several nights. Well, it was fun back then to look forward to the next night of the show. I enjoyed that back then, but then when you put it all together in one movie, parts of it seem to drag, and you don't get.
I disagree with that.
Well, I don't. And
Because
it's just
you don't have to watch it all at once, Sophie.
No, you don't. You
we
can watch
watched
it
it-
like a miniseries.
We watched it all at once so that we could review it in a timely manner. But if you really want to enjoy it, you can watch it at your own pace.
Yeah, and then you watch these other movies like let's see, Thinner,
Silver
and
Bullet, and they go by like.
and they go by really fast. Then you kind of think, well, they're a little bit oversimplified, and
Yeah, so
you
it's
could have
like
put a little bit more meat on the bones.
it's either oversimplified or too much.
But this movie kind of sticks out just because I think of Gary Busey, and
Yeah.
you
It's
know
his movie.
he's been on a few reality shows. I can say The Apprentice is one, which anyway, he kind of stood out as a people didn't think much of him, and they criticized him because he's had kind of a colorful private life.
So what?
And so, but you see him in this movie, and just to me, it made him look a lot more positive, and he just made it better. I'm talking about that I rated it with the cheeseburger Happy Meal. What do you get with a cheeseburger? What do you get with any Happy Meal?
A toy.
A toy. So it's like he's not a toy. Sounds like he didn't have
toy.
any meaningful place in the movie, but we've both talked about yes, he did. So
And by
anyway.
the way, the toys for McDonald's used to be much cooler.
It just depends,
As a
because when
kid.
they hand out those little teddy bears, those are really cute.
No, they suck.
No, they don't. I really like them.
They have a lot of toys nowadays, and they're really
Yeah,
stupid.
they're plastic, and they're just like,
They're just so
you
fake.
probably stomp on it and it would turn into dust.
When I was a kid, I got Shark Boy and Lava Girl action figures, like all these kinds of action figures, all sorts of cool toys, and a lot cooler than what they do nowadays.
Okay.
And you gotta mention too that Gary Busey's Happy Meal has an older toy, not a newer toy that sucks, right? I mean, Gary Busey's Happy Meal doesn't have a teddy bear in it, right?
Well, I like the teddy bears.
No one else does.
Well, I do, and a lot of people do because they collect them. So anyway, we got to move on now. So we'll be seeing you soon with our ranking list, which, like, I don't think anybody cares.
Yeah,
but
they do.
I know Marco loves to do this. So that's all, everybody. See you soon.
Goodbye, everybody. Say goodbye, Sophie.
Bye, everybody.